The news had been relentless for weeks. A local killer, the papers called him the Hollow Mask, stalking the outskirts of the town, leaving bodies in his wake. They'd found no trace, no pattern, nothing. Just fear and rumors that chilled the spine. I'd laughed it off at first, until I noticed him. Not the papers, not the headlines. Him, outside my window, watching, just barely hidden in the shadows. At first I thought it was a trick of the streetlight, the sway of a tree branch. But then things changed. I found a shoe, my size, placed neatly at my doorstep. A message, maybe a warning? I didn't report it, not yet. Fear had a tongue of its own, and mine wouldn't speak. That night, the streets were empty, and I made the mistake of going out to check my mailbox. I felt it instantly, the pressure in the air, the way the darkness shifted. My skin crawled. From the corner of my eye, I saw him, masked. The knife gleamed, catching the halo of the old street lamp. My pulse thundered in my ears. I ran back towards the apartment. Hands shaking in the panic, I dropped my keys behind me. I went back for them, but by this time he'd already approached too far for me to try again. I darted down the street. The alleys twisted impossibly. Familiar streets, now alien. He followed, always calm. I could hear the thudding of boots against pavement. Each step of mine sounded loud, panicked. A drumbeat, calling him closer. He increased his pace, now running behind me. He lunged once, hand brushing my shoulder. I spun around, violently striking at his forearm, hearing the scrape of metal against bone. He staggered slightly, but not enough to be fazed by it. I ran harder, lungs burning, legs trembling, willing myself forward. The city streets became a maze of terror. He was everywhere, impossible to pin down. I found a payphone and called the cops, my hands shaking so violently I could barely dial. By the time the operator answered, he was there, standing behind me, knife poised, mask shadowed inside his hood. My scream caught in my throat. I hung up. I had no choice but to run. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment, slamming, then locking the door. My legs had turned to jelly. I sank to the floor, gasping, thinking the night had ended. But the shadows inside the apartment were heavier, darker, as if the night had followed me home. I thought I could hide, but then I heard it. The soft, deliberate scrape of boots on my balcony outside. He was there, and he had been all along, waiting for me to let my guard down. I pressed my back against the wall, every muscle coiled to spring. The knife glinted again, a cold promise. My phone was dead, no escape. And then I realized, with a sick certainty, that he didn't need to enter the apartment at all. He only needed me to think I was safe. I crawled to the window, peering through the curtain. There he was, masked, silent, knife raised, staring up at me with that impossible patience. His hand tapped the railing lightly. And then the last thing I saw before the curtain fell back into place was the knife pointing at the door. Not the window, not the wall, the door. He would come in when I least expected it. I was alive. But alive meant nothing. The hunt was not over, not even close. I held my breath, pressed against the floor, listening as he circled outside, waiting. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that when he finally entered, I would have nowhere to run. I never should have taken that shortcut through the park. It was late. The odd streetlight, shadows stretched and twisted across the cracked pavement. The wind whispered through the skeletal trees, carrying a cold that dug deeper than it should. A creeping unease coiled around my spine. I wasn't alone. At first, it was just the rustle of leaves behind me, faint and easily dismissed. Then, The footsteps appeared, echoing mine but slightly offbeat. I didn't want to turn around. I told myself it was a jogger, a harmless stranger. But the park was dark and empty. The paths twisted, unfamiliar, the perfect trap. I tried to quicken my pace discreetly, but the steps behind didn't get any quieter. They were keeping up. Panic began sinking in. A shadow darted across the path, vanishing before I could see its shape. My stomach clenched. My mind raced. I stumbled into the old maintenance shed at the edge of the park, hoping to find a hiding place. I crouched low, trying to calm my racing heart. Listening. Footsteps. They were close now, circling. Then he appeared, tall, impossibly controlled, mask glinting under the failing light. A knife gleamed in his hand, catching the last flicker of the street lamp. My throat dried. No sound came. I ran. Out of the shed, into the winding paths, lungs burning, legs screaming. He followed, every step measured, letting me exhaust myself. The chase was a slow and cruel game. Trees bent into impossible angles. Paths twisted unnaturally. Roots tore at my shoes. Every turn brought the same creeping terror. He was always there, always close enough to feel his presence, but just far enough to taunt me. I reached the bridge over the frozen creek and thought to climb down the embankment to escape into the woods. As I clutched the icy railing, he appeared, less than a meter away. He reached out, his gloved hand brushing my shoulder. A jolt of panic shot through me. I pulled back, barely freeing myself, and felt the knife scrape my jacket. My breath came in ragged gasps. Instinct took over. I swung blindly at his cheek, punching into hard resistance. He staggered slightly, enough for me to shove him back, but he recovered instantly. His mask tilted, revealing nothing. I dove down the embankment, sliding into the underbrush, cutting my hands and knees on thorns. Adrenaline drowned out the pain. Branches whipped my face. Thorns tore at my clothes. But I pressed on, crawling and stumbling. The woods seemed endless, a labyrinth designed for him to stalk me. Every time I dared to glance back, he was there, silent, perfect in his rhythm, a predator moving with terrifying precision. I tripped over a gnarled root and fell face first into mud. He loomed over me, knife gleaming. Desperation surged. I kicked out, clawed at his arm, slamming my fist into him. For a moment he faltered, and I scrambled to my feet, crawling and running, dragging myself through the undergrowth. Finally, the woods opened to a deserted street. Streetlights cast dim halos on wet asphalt. Hope surged. I bolted forward, ignoring the cuts and blood. Behind me, I heard him step onto the pavement, slowing just long enough for me to know the hunt had not ended. His knife reflected the pale glow of the streetlights, still pointing toward me, waiting. I reached my apartment building, slammed the door, and bolted every lock. I collapsed against it, heaving, drenched in sweat and blood. My body shook uncontrollably. The hunt had paused, but I knew it hadn't stopped. Every shadow in my apartment pulsed with his presence. Every creak in the floor, a reminder of the monster outside. Even here, I wasn't safe. Sleep would be impossible. I realized finally that freedom was temporary, an illusion. The night had claimed a part of me, and it wouldn't release me. I was alive, but only as a vessel for memory, terror, and anticipation. A reminder that some hunts never end. And when I closed my eyes, I saw him. The mask, the knife, the perfect patience. Watching, waiting. The hunt would resume, and I'd have no place to hide. Not in my own home. Not in the world I thought I had returned to. He would find me again. He always finds his prey. I was alive, yes, but the shadows had followed me home. I was no longer a man. I was prey, and the night had only begun. The city went quiet after the sirens. News stations broke in with an emergency alert. An inmate had escaped from St. Mary's Psychiatric Hospital, just 15 miles away. His name was never mentioned, only his history. Violent episodes, multiple homicides, hallucinations, and one chilling line: "He doesn't stop once he's picked someone." The police were everywhere that night, but none near me. A good sign, clearly no need to worry. I went to close my blinds before going to bed, but saw a figure outside dashing between streetlights, hiding in the shadows between each one in what appeared to be some sort of dress. I continued to watch, but whoever it was eventually passed, and so I finally shut the blinds. A couple of beers on the sofa late at night, my eyes were just making it look worse than it was. The first sound came around 2 a.m, a scrape against my front door, metal on metal. My heart stuttered. I crept closer, pressed my eye to the peephole. Nothing. But when I turned away, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I like this place. Cozy." I dropped the phone, bile rising in my throat. Nobody had this number. Nobody. For the next 2 nights, it escalated. The sound of breathing outside my window. The creak of footsteps in the hallway. Slow and deliberate, even though I lived on the 5th floor and nobody ever used it this late. Every time I called the police, they showed up too late, finding nothing. On the 3rd night, he made it inside. The noise woke me first, the soft squeal of hinges. I froze in bed, eyes locked on the bedroom door, which now stood open an inch wider than I remembered. The darkness beyond it seemed alive. I reached for the baseball bat I kept by the nightstand. My fingers shook so hard it nearly slipped. I crept to the door, nudged it open with the bat, and looked into the living room. The couch cushions had been slit open. Stuffing spilled across the carpet like entrails. My photographs, the ones framed on the shelf, had been rearranged. My face cut out, taped upside down on the wall. Then I heard him. The wet rasp of a laugh. From the kitchen. I sprinted for the front door. My hands fumbled with the locks, heart pounding. A shadow loomed from behind, moving too fast. A hand clamped around my arm, fingers digging like claws. I swung the bat with all my strength, connecting with a sickening crack. He staggered back, a hulking figure. A dress? No, a hospital gown. I ran bare feet slapping against tile, knocking over lamps and chairs in my desperation. He was right behind me, his breath ragged, his laugh low and broken. I made it to the bathroom, slammed the door, and held my weight against it. His fists pounded, shaking the hinges, splinters flying from the frame. I braced harder, sobbing, until, suddenly, it stopped. Silence. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. Carefully, I opened it. I peeped around the corner into the living room. From the corner, the shadows shifted. He burst from the darkness, tackling me to the ground. My head cracked against the floor, stars exploding in my vision. His hands wrapped around my throat, squeezing, nails digging into my skin. I punched, thrashed, kicked. My hand landed on a shard of broken glass from the smashed table. With everything left in me, I drove it into his side. He screamed, not in pain but in fury, before stumbling back. I scrambled to my feet, ran for the bedroom, slammed the door, and shoved the dresser against it. For minutes I listened. His breathing, his muttering. Then, silence again. Sirens wailed in the distance. Relief surged through me. They were coming. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping, body trembling. The pounding on the door started again, furious, unrelenting. The sirens turned off. They'd arrived. By the time the police were upstairs, they found nothing but wreckage. My apartment looked like a storm had ripped through it. Splintered wood, shattered glass, overturned furniture, but no sign of him. No blood trail, no footprints, nothing they could hold on to. They searched every room twice, checked the stairwells, even went door to door questioning neighbors who only shook their heads and muttered that they hadn't heard a thing. One officer finally put a hand on my shoulder, gave me that practiced look of weary sympathy. "You've been through hell," he said, "but there's no one here now. You're safe." They wrote up their report, then left me standing there in the wreckage of my own home. Their radios crackled with new calls, more urgent emergencies pulling them away. I begged them not to go, but they assured me the locks held, that no one could have escaped without them noticing. And then, just like that, they were gone. The silence after their departure was worse than the struggle itself. My breath caught when I noticed it, on my bedroom wall, letters raw and jagged, the grooves still wet and glistening as though written in fresh blood. "You're mine now."